Welcome to Inspiring Possible. I'm Christy Pennison, former stuck person turned therapist and dream consultant. Are you feeling stuck, overwhelmed, uncertain, or just need a little inspiration? Then I want to help you gain the clarity, confidence, and courage to create possibilities and live a life you love. Because, folks, life's too short to be miserable.
Hello, my inspiring people. How is your week going? I don't know what part of the week it is when you're listening, but I hope it's going okay. However, if you are in a place where you may be like me this week, where you've had ups and downs, or you go to work or whatever you do in life and you're like, wake up rising and shining in the beginning of the day, and you're like, I can't wait to conquer this day. I've done my grounding, my mindfulness meditation, my prayers, my exercise, whatever you do to start your morning. And some of y'all might be like, Christy, all those things sound really great. Intentions for 2026, if that's okay. We're not doing no shame or judgment here. Come as you are. But whatever you do to start your morning, it could be a cup of coffee. You may not have any of those luxuries right now in your life because you might have young kids and they're pounding on you and you just got to, move with whatever life's throwing you. But if there's some times where you're like, man, I really wish I could show up a little bit more consistently in my life in a way that feels really good for me. Or if you're in a season of reinvention or really trying to figure out what do I want this next phase of my journey to look like, well, then, my friends, you have come to the right place. Because today I have a guest with me, Johanna Danaher, who is not only an executive and career coach with 25 plus years of experience shaping talent and culture and leadership. And she's done all kind of things. We'll put it up in the show notes because it's really impressive. But she really is now passionate about helping us learn how to live more within this energy that we want to live in on a day-to-day basis. And I told her before I pushed the recording button, it's always amazing how somebody comes on the show for me. No, I'm just kidding. It's for you, really. But but I learned too because this week I felt a little bit up and down and in between. And so I'm really excited. Welcome on the show, Johanna, to help guide us along this thing called life.
Well, thank you so much, Christy. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to talk with everybody. And you're right, right? The things that we need do manifest in our lives exactly when we need them.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about how you found yourself here in what you do now, which is coaching with Anchor to Aspire coaching. I know this is not where you started, so I'm always curious to know how people got to where they are when they come on the show.
Yeah, so actually I'm going to rewind a little bit further back in my life because I actually started my undergrad degree was in marine biology, right? So
Oh,
science
okay.
and very much focused on, the ocean, and I was studying lobsters in Maine. And after I graduated, I actually went to New York, which is where I was originally from, and I had no clue what I wanted to do. And that was okay because I was doing the gig work in New York in the early '90s, and it was gig work before it was cool, right? We think gig work is, like, cool now, it's fractional
Yeah, I feel
work,
like
it's
it's
all of this
trending. I mean,
stuff.
I'm not from New York, but I feel like that is trending in the more northeastern part of the state.
Yeah, but back then it was temping, right? So it was like and people you would say, "Well, what are you doing? You're not getting a real full-time job?" And I was like,
What's
"Actually,
wrong with you?
well, yeah,
Yeah.
right, exactly." And I was like, "Well, I'm exploring. I'm still trying to figure out what does this thing called life mean for me and what kind of role do I really want to play?" And what I found during that exploration, right, I went into multiple different types of companies for 2-week or 3-week or 6-month gigs. And everything that lit me up, that got me really excited about going to work was about people. And how could I help support people be the best them every day? So I fell into HR and into what we now call people experience in the HR world because it was all about helping people find their job, right? I was a recruiter. Then it was all about helping leaders lead in the best way possible. I was doing leadership development. Then it was creating a climate and a culture in an organization that enabled people to thrive. So the thread line that pulled through my entire career and my life really was how can I support people in those moments of uncertainty, challenge, and a change. And that's what I'm doing even today. So after my corporate career, I'm now focused on supporting pre-retirees as they're thinking about shifting into retirement, women in perimenopause and menopause as they're sort of navigating the physical and mental and life shifts that come with that. And then anyone who's facing a career pivot to really think about how do they do that with courage and confidence.
Yeah, I love that. And that's that courage and confidence part. I mean, we can all do things, but it's hard to get in that mindset to really be able to do it and really with courage be able to take that next step in whatever it is. So it sounds like the helping of people has always been along your story. And I love that you realized the lobsters weren't for you, maybe people were, but you allowed yourself some time to get those experiences to really find a common theme about what it was that really lights you up. But tell me a little bit about those that people that you help. What are the biggest challenges that you find people have when they're transitioning through these different life stages, or again, just trying to figure out what the heck your body is doing to you at different points in time in life? And what do you find that are the biggest things that people really struggle with to be able to push themselves to the next point?
So there's 3 things that sort of come to mind as you ask that question. The first is, the fact that people don't trust themselves, as much as we should, right? There's this imposter syndrome that often comes up for, many women who are stepping into new leadership roles, right? They don't believe that they have the skill, or that they don't believe that they belong at the table. And I felt that myself, right? There was a moment where I was promoted into a role now leading a team of my peers. And I was like, well, wait a minute, I do not have the pedigree to be in this room. But I did, right? And I realized that it was the transferable skills that I was bringing that actually gave the team a differentiator. And so that's one. It's the fact that we don't trust ourselves enough to believe that we belong in whatever space that we're stepping into. The second is oftentimes people are stuck because they feel that they have to stay in a role or in, in whatever. They feel I have to do something and they're stuck. And really the only thing that's holding them stuck is them, right? It's nothing else, it's them. And it stems from just either that lack of courage, that lack of confidence, or this belief, this story that we have to stay and we can't make the change. And then the third is fear. Fear is a big one. And I think fear
Yeah.
underpins a lot of what we when we're stuck, when we're not self-trusting, but it's fear and it's fear of failure.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? I think you brought up such a good point. I mean, I think sometimes when we think about what keeps us stuck, fear does come up as like, okay, that might be something that's a little bit more obvious, but not always. It's like not always relevant. We don't always name it as that. And so I can even think of myself whenever you said, also, you realize that it's you. You don't realize that there can be a change. Like I can remember years ago, I was in a job and I've talked about it a little bit on this podcast, that I really found fulfilling, but there was a lot of changes that happened in that. I had a lot of my identity wrapped up in that role. But when the changes started to affect a lot of who I was, then it really became a little bit more not healthy for me to be in that workplace. And for the longest time, I didn't think that I had the option to change. I just really didn't. And again, now looking back, I'm like, of course, you could have changed at any moment in time. You could have said peace. You could have left. You could have whatever. But in my mind, I just felt such an obligation and a loyalty and a thing to say, like, no, I just really need to stick this out and go through the hard. And I'm not saying that there isn't some things you need to stick through and go through the hard.
Mm.
But in that experience, it wasn't until I really started asking questions, realized there's a whole different layer of options out there. I limited myself based off of my past experience of what I
Yeah.
thought I could do or knew about. And then eventually, when I had enough courage to just say, it's either this or this thing's gonna take it down with me, then I made the leap. And I can even think about people as you were talking about that. I can think about friends or family that I have that sometimes, again, we all stay sometimes stuck in these places that we
Mhm.
really we know we wanna change, We know that there is a possibility, maybe even so that something could be better than what we're in, but we're either so invested or we are afraid of how is this going to work, or what if I move into this other role, or if I do something different or change this relationship, then all of that time lost of
Mhm.
all the stuff that I gave to this thing. And what would you say to somebody maybe who is in that position where they're like, you know, I may not trust myself, but I may know that I need to change, but I don't
Mhm.
really see how this could change because I don't see how this could, whatever it is, maybe I need to make a certain amount of money, or maybe I don't know if anybody will love. I mean, the list of like why we don't do things is very long. But what
Yeah.
would you say to somebody in that moment that's really
Well, I think there's 2 things, and the first is that it's completely normal, right, to feel that way, right? It's totally normal that we would feel that sense of uncertainty, right? When we're making a this type of, introspection, we don't necessarily want as a human to put ourselves into a space of harm or pain, right? I mean, that is fundamentally scientific, right? We are always in like when something triggers us, we go into fight or flight or even withdraw, right? So we don't want to cause ourselves pain. So we do everything to avoid pain. And when pain is associated with shifting a job and actually moving out of what is comfortable into something that is uncomfortable, we come up with all of these reasons not to do it. So, first, we normalize the fact that it is normal to feel that way. Then I talk about understanding values because a lot of us have done a values exercise at some point in our career, but we have never come back to it again. And our values, probably the core of us hasn't changed much, but they might show up differently at different stages of our life. So I always say, let's look at what is it that really you value in a role, in a job, in a relationship, in the community, whatever we're talking about, right? Let's look at that. And let's look at that whether or not that value is actually being honored or if it's
Mhm.
not. And then how is that actually showing up in your day to day, right? Physically, how do you feel? Emotionally, how do you feel physically? What's happening to your body under stress? Because so many of us operate under constant stress. And especially when we're working in a role that we feel that we need to have a change in, we're going to be
Mhm.
under a lot of stress, whether we know it consciously or not.
Yeah, and well, and that kind of maybe brings me because I think most people can identify if they are at that point where they're like, I know I really feel like I need to make a change, but it is scary and this is what's holding me back. I think most people can recognize if they really take the time to give them some space and intention to be like, yeah, I'm not showing up as my best self every day. What used to maybe be super energizing to me when I came to work, like now I'm taking it home. It's impacting my relationships or vice versa. I think about
Hmm.
work and relationships, like even though they're very separate, I do think those are the two biggest things that people will sometimes shift out of, in
Hmm.
life. It's either redefining a career, stepping out of a career, things like that, or it's a relationship that's then causing conflict in the other areas of our life. And so paying attention, I guess what I'm hearing you say is to pay attention to really how is that showing up for you. And then I love the values piece because you're probably like me. I've done values exercises probably more times than I can count on my hand. And I can think about them, but really trying to evaluate whether is my value being honored is you really have to create a space for intention to be able to
Yeah.
evaluate that.
Yeah.
And a lot of
Yeah,
people
you
might
do.
be like, I don't even know what that means,
Hmm.
So how would you say a value is being honored? How would you see evidence of that if that value is being honored in somebody's life?
Yeah, so I'll give a great example of my own, right? So one of my values that's core is being authentic, right? And it was not being honored in the
Mhm.
last couple of years of my career because I was not being the authentic me. I was facing some pretty significant caregiver scenarios. My mother and my stepfather were both facing some diagnosis and some illness, so I had to spend a lot of time with them. My daughter was starting college, so I was now an empty nester, and I was not being authentic in really telling what I needed and what and really
Mm.
be and I wasn't authentically and honestly telling my team where I needed help. And so that sort of, value, I felt that I was always on edge, that I was always coming up with some sort of an excuse, and then that drove me to feel angry at myself, at the situation, to put blame on others as opposed to on me because I wasn't speaking up and saying, I can't do this." Right? Instead because I had this sort of sense of responsibility to the business. I had the sense that I can't disappoint anyone, anywhere, at any time, in terms of the caregiving and then my daughter and then the work and then everything else. And so I just let that whole spin out of control, and I realized I'm not being me. Because if I had been me, I would have brought it to the table. I would have had conversations with my team. I would have taken a caregiver, period of time out of work. I would have, said, I need help in some of these areas. And I didn't do any of that. And I burnt myself out.
Yeah. Well, and I think people listening probably can really resonate. They've been there at least at some point and may not even have realized it. I know I've been there. And I was thinking even the other day, randomly, I have all these random thoughts that fly through my head at any point in time, as most of us do. And I was driving down the road and I'm like, there was something I asked for help with recently. And it sounds like there may be a similarity here between me and you. I think always people that really like helping people, they're like the last person to ever ask for help from somebody else, which is really sad
Mhm.
sometimes. But I was getting ready. It's that self reliance. Okay, I'm going to go do it myself. I've gotten this far. I'm going to go do this thing. And I remember somebody in my life had asked me, they're like, Christy, instead of us, we need to go check on a property that, make sure that there wasn't busted pipes due to a freeze and stuff. And they're like, instead of you driving all the way, why don't you just ask the person that lives next to it to just go check on it? But it was at night, and I was like, I don't know what they're doing. I don't want to put that on them. It just
Mhm.
makes more sense for me to drive 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and then ask them to drive by. You know what I mean? To take maybe, and eventually this family member of mine was like, "Christy, please, just for the love of Pete's sake, like, ask the person if they can help you." And sure enough, they did. They said yes, went over there 5 minutes, done, would have taken me 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about this thing that sometimes I think we even make excuses of why we shouldn't accept help or why we don't wanna put our stuff onto other people, and we still wanna show up as this super bionic person that just supposedly is supposed to do all these things. Like in your story, caregiver, you're also supposed to be supporting your daughter as she enters this new, phase of life and going in off to college, and then you're supposed to show up at 100% to your job doing all the things.
All the things, and
Right.
and you can't do all of the things, and we're not meant to carry everything on our own. But for those of us who are helpers, that helper gene, so to speak, our superpower often becomes the thing that we self-sabotage with,
Yeah.
right? We don't put our self-care first, and then that can then trigger downstream blame, anger,
Mhm.
avoidance, right? And so those are all of the things that when I talk with my clients, we spend time saying, okay, how is this showing up? Is this showing up
Mhm.
for you in a way that you're able to access it like it's your superpower, or is it actually self-sabotaging, right? And
Yeah.
it's so eye-opening, and once you have awareness of what's going on, then you can make a conscious choice. But it's still gonna come back. Like, I'm a people
Yeah.
person, I'm a helper, and I find myself stuck in that loop a lot of the time. And I have to remember, I even had this sticker on my laptop that was, said, "How can I help?" Because it was always me reminding myself that always am asking other people, "How can I help?" But it was that visual reminder that sometimes I need to ask for help myself. And
Yeah.
someone told me last week, it was you've heard that adage, "You can't pour from an empty cup," right? We probably
Mhm.
all heard that. We probably all have posters of it somewhere on our walls or on our phone screen. But they said to me the other day, "You can't pour from a filling cup either. You can only
Mm,
pour from the overflow. I was
yeah.
like, "Oh, I love that." And then I'm like, "Oh, wow, you're absolutely right. I have to fill my cup first, all the way, and
Yeah.
then I can pour from it."
That's right, because then you actually have more to give. I used to have the discussion with one of, my lovely family members who were made nameless for the sake of this podcast. But anyways, we were talking one day and, it was a good conversation because this person really comes from a generous heart, and they just wanted to keep giving and giving and giving. And I said, "Listen, I see your giving and generous nature." I said, "But I also wanna remind you that if you don't have it to give, you can't give it. Because then what ends up happening is you're hurting yourself in the process."
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean that that's a level of, from what I'm hearing you say, selfishness. It's just a thing of like, we have to be willing to take care of ourselves, hold our own boundaries, know what we need to truly show up
Mm.
in a way that, to your point, is authentic to us. Um, that makes us feel aligned in life because I know you felt it. Anytime that I start to feel like I'm really not in a place that's truly being able to live out the values as well as I would like, there is that. I love how you said anger, blame, excuses. There's normally some anger. I'm angry at somebody.
Mhm.
I'm resentful to somebody. I'm irritable in some way. Things that honestly could have been perceived in a wholly different light, in a positive light, gets perceived in like, everybody's out to get me and nobody's out to get me.
Yeah.
It's just that I'm not in a good place so that I'm not being able to really look at it from 1,000 different angles to be more understanding and actually take it for maybe at a positive curiosity standpoint than a than a like doom gloom. So to that point, how do you help your clients or just people in general that feel really stuck maybe in that cycle of excuses, anger,
Mhm.
blame, be able to notice it? Because kind of back to our conversation in the very beginning, we all wanna wake up, we might wake up ready to conquer the world, and then we get in the day, and the day, you know, slaps you down. And how do you be able to notice when you're starting to get in this loop?
Yeah, so first there's a couple of things, right? So the
Okay.
first thing that everybody can do every day, right, is embrace the power of a pause, right? So the minute that you start to feel your shoulders tensing, you start to feel like that stress come on you, and we all can recognize when that's happening. We physically feel it in our body. Pause. Just 5 minutes, not even, maybe only 2 minutes, and breathe. The moment that we pause, we're interrupting what I call the protection cycle. Trigger, thought, feeling, behavior, and then it's a reinforcement. So, right? Something triggers us. We have an immediate thought. We feel something, anger, blame, whatever it might be. We act a certain way. If we pause, we interrupt that. So we can just breathe. So that's the first and foremost, most important thing that each and every one of us can do. And I
Yeah,
would
don't
also
get in that
say,
email and just start replying is what you should not
never.
do.
Never. Sit on it, right? And also strategically create moments of pause for you in your day. When I was in the corporate career, a lot of times we would say, I'm in back to back to back to back to back meetings, and we would glorify this busyness, right? And so we never had the moment of pause. So one of the best practices I did about 10 years ago was actually schedule 2 calendar invites on my calendar every single day. One was red, and it was 15 minutes that said stop. And I color coded it red because it's like a stop sign. And then the other was green, and that was 90 minutes. And that was my focus time where I could go deep. My team knew that if there was an urgent meeting, obviously that I would rearrange some of those things, but these were my focus times and these were my stop times and I honored those. And that's really important to be able to do because it creates that space for us, right? To avoid the trigger, but it also creates that space for us to be intentional. And then the other thing that I offer as I work with clients is an actual energy leadership index. And this is a deep assessment that really helps you to understand how is your energy showing up on the good days and then what's happening under stress. Because there's 7 levels of energy that we can all individually access at any time. Some of those energy levels are more depleting, right? That's where we're angry or we're withdrawing or we're rationalizing or tolerating a situation. and others are energizing, right? We're collaborating, we're seeing the opportunities and the possibilities, everything you just talked about, Christy. But the Energy Leadership Index really gives you a window into what's happening uniquely for you so you can respond from conscious choice versus reacting from the trigger. And interestingly, I've taken this Energy Leadership Index 3 times. One time was before my role was eliminated, one time was right after, and one time was very recently. And I saw a dramatic change in my stress reaction when I first took it. 16.2% of my stress reaction was anger. When I just
Mm.
took it last month, 6.2%. So awareness. Now, what happened is the toleration, energy under stress kind of increased. The apathy, the victim or withdrawal energy increased because I'm like, well, it's not my problem. I'm not taking on somebody else's problem and then getting angry about it. And then also other energy levels that were higher, more collaboration or actually looking for the
Yeah.
opportunity increased.
Man, I'm gonna have to take this index because I'm thinking about myself, like what you just said. What was that second one that you said? Is taking on other people's problems.
Yep. Yep.
And how that does affect your energy. And it's so hard because sometimes I don't know if again if this is a helper thing or just a person thing. It's like whenever you are trying you're like wired to try to help people fix things or solve a problem and something gets thrown at you that really is not your direct responsibility to help that person solve. And you know a person is in discomfort but it's really not something that has to do with you, or maybe it is indirectly, how you can just leave it over there
Yeah.
and even know that that person might be in discomfort, that you have to let them be okay with figuring out their own discomfort. I feel like a lot of people might struggle with that, like just, so you said that
Yeah.
increased? That
That
increased energy?
increase, the energy actually increased where I wasn't doing that
Yeah, you
anymore.
wasn't. You
Yeah.
weren't you weren't, like, trying to take on everybody's
Yep.
energy and stuff of, like, "Oh, I'm in this anger." And how does that work? Because I think a lot of people, like, you can get yourself into a better energy, and maybe you can tell us how to do that in a second.
Mhm.
But how does it affect people when other people are in that cycle and they may not always be aware?
Yeah, yeah, and that happens every day, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
all the time. Just giving ourselves awareness can help us recognize, and then also what we can do, right, when we're seeing that someone else is in maybe that cycle, is we can actually intentionally pause, right? You could say, "Hey, let's just take a pause in this conversation right now. Let's come back to it a little bit later when we are all have had a moment to sort of process." Right? That's a very easy non-conflict way of actually de-escalating a particular situation. Or we can ask questions and just be really curious.
Mhm.
Or we can demonstrate true empathy and listen and try to put ourselves in that other person's, shoes, right? So there's a lot of different little things that we can do, but I still come back to really take a pause, right? That
Mhm, yeah.
is probably the biggest superpower we all have on in front of us.
Pause and breathing. I mean, breathing is always available to us, but it's like the smallest things that are just so hard to sometimes
Yeah.
remember to incorporate in those moments of stress.
Yeah. Yeah, they really are because we wanna fix it fast. We want to address it quickly. We need to move on to the next thing. It's causing us pain. So again, it's all of those things are real. They happen to us, but our body is reacting, right? And we can create these new neural pathways when we start to build this as a habit, right? As soon as we
Yeah.
start to notice it, we name it clearly. Fear loses power when we name something, right? And then we can choose intentionally once we actually recognize it and name it for what it is. And again, fear is I see fear as fuel, so that's kind of fun. But also, anger has a place, right? Grief has a place. All of these are important emotions. We can hold them equally true alongside other emotions, right? It's not like we can't have grief and joy at the same time, right? You could have grief that you lost someone or something or a job, but you could have joy in remembering the things that were wonderful about that person, the role, or have excitement for the next. So all of these things can equally live in us at any given time. But it's important just to recognize them, to pause, and to really just ask ourselves what's going on right now.
Yeah. Well, how do you help people kind of be able to figure out how to stay in that? I don't know if you want to call it higher energy frequency, but more of the like how we can kind of show up a little bit more consistently and not be as reactive. And I know maybe the first step is to pause, but like two things where then we get in the stuck spiral.
Yeah. So again, I think one of them is also giving ourselves grace and recognizing
Mm.
that oftentimes we are our worst critic, right? So we have that
What?
inner critic in us,
Yeah.
we would never talk to a friend like we would talk to ourselves. So the first thing is let's pause and let's recognize what the heck's going on. And then the second is really about let's understand the story that we're telling ourselves about ourselves in this moment, right? Is it real? Or is it not? So that's the two big practices. And then the third is let's be intentional about what choice are we making? How are we moving forward? And why are we making that choice? Right? That's how the root of all decisions, right? We have to know what are we choosing? Why are we choosing it? How does it impact ourselves? How does it impact others? And then what are we going to do? Right? So that's sort of very, very simply pause and name it. Ask yourself what story it's telling and if that story is true, and then decide what to do.
Yeah. What do you think has helped you now that you've really I know this is gonna be a little bit off from what we were just talking about, but when I'm thinking back to your taking that inventory to kind of see the growth that you've made in different areas or where things are not as maybe triggering or maybe you're not as in that anger space as much. What are the things that you think you've done intentionally that have, and it may have been all those three things plus some, but is
Mhm,
there something that really sticks out to you that that's really helped you shift into more of this? It sounds like, I don't know, say higher energy, but like better
mhm. Yeah, yeah,
feeling
I would
more
say
aligned. Yeah.
higher energy, absolutely. So there's a couple of things. Being really honest with my emotions, because a lot of times, and this is something I grew up sort of hearing: leave your emotions at the door. They don't belong in the workplace. Well, that's kind of wrong, right? We can't leave our emotions at the door. They're part of us. They're with us no matter what happens. So getting real honest with them and really naming what those emotions were and what was my behavior when I was feeling that emotion. So really
Mm.
recognizing that. And I actually have an emotion wheel. It's a sticker that I put on the top of my laptop so it says, what's the emotion and then what's the
Before when it
coping.
goes down. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love it, right? Because then what's the coping strategy, right? So it's but it helps me recognize it's not just that I'm angry, it's what's underneath that, or it's not this that I'm tired, it's what's underneath that. So getting really invested in emotional awareness. And I also bring this up because a lot of times people will tell you when you ask them, "How are you?" and "How are you feeling?" They'll tell you, "I'm fine." Well, fine just means feelings inside not expressed, right? So
I
you
love that.
got
I've never heard that before.
I'm like, I love that one too. So it's like,
Feelings
okay.
inside, not expressed. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, and some of us have been taught, like you said, either in the workplace or just even maybe even the way that we were raised. Like, when we express a feeling, I always look at these kids that just like, can really express any emotion, or my teenager at home that doesn't mind tell him, expressing the feelings. And I'm sometimes like perplexed by it because I'm like, oh, why are you sharing that emotion right now? Like, you know what I mean? Because there's been a lot of conditioning for me throughout the years. It's like, suppress it down, keep it close to
Mhm.
the chest, maintain and part is my occupation, but neutral expression, hold the space. And it's interesting because sometimes what happens, I'm gonna ask you this question. What happens when those feelings are not expressed?
Yeah. Well, sometimes then we just go into this whole space of numbness,
Mhm.
or all of a sudden we get to the point where there's a trigger that all it becomes explosive, right? And so I don't ever want to be in that space where I'm either too numb and I'm not recognizing the emotion, or I'm explosive because I have bottled it up for too long that then now it's getting released and it's like, you don't even want to know me. So I don't wanna be there, and I have been there, there were times where I was, under a lot of stress, and all of a sudden, I would be unrecognizable to the people I loved the most, right? And I'm
You're
like,
like,
"What am I doing here? Why am I yelling? I don't understand this." But yeah, so it's really important to get hyper specific on emotionally what's going on.
yeah. Well, if somebody is listening and they're like, maybe I need some more awareness in my life, or I do feel stuck and it's really been hard for me to make a change. And, I just maybe listening to our conversation, they're like, I want to know more. Where can people kind of find out a little bit more about you? Or what are the things that maybe do you do to help people through some of these awareness so that they can be a little bit more aligned and more values aligned in their life and be able to really move into whatever it is that they're trying to move forward into?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to get in touch with me is on my website. That's anchor2aspire.com. And there you can actually book a complimentary coffee connection, right? Where we can actually talk through what are some of the challenges and see where there might be opportunities for me to support. And then the other way is on LinkedIn. So I post on LinkedIn daily and I'm very engaged with my community out on LinkedIn. So I love, when people are seeing something that I've shared. I'm telling my stories, my experiences, my lived moments of success and of mistakes or failures. So, absolutely engage with me there. I love the connections. I love the conversations that can happen in the comments as well. And then the other thing I offer is what's called the Clarity Current. It is a short term coaching program. It starts with that energy leadership index, right, where you would get that personalized understanding of your energy on the good day and on the bad day. And then it follows with a detailed debrief of what that looks like in your life. And then two coaching sessions from there where we can focus in on, something that we learned about in the Energy Leadership Index. So the Clarity Current is also available on my website.
Okay, awesome. Well, let me ask you this. So, since you've went through your, again, your own life, your own challenges that have then led you to, again, really find ways to support other people in this journey and living a little bit more aligned and authentic. If you were to go back and give yourself maybe a word of encouragement to younger you along the journey, and I don't know which part of the journey you want to pick, but one thing that you wish you would have known now, or something that you would want to tell younger you at this point
Mm,
to maybe help you along.
great question. And I think I would tell my younger self is to trust yourself more,
Mm-mm.
to to really build that sort of self trust. Um, and yeah, just trust
Yeah.
that you got whatever you have what you need inside of you. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's so hard because you know what? I really do think, I don't know what you think about this. I think when we are dropped down in the world, I think we have a little bit more trust in ourselves. But over the years, it just gets, chipped away at by either noise or opinions or things we're taught or comments made that it just makes us doubt. Um, even sometimes our choices, right?
Mhm.
And I think the more we can learn to listen, which is a hard thing these days. I don't know if you'd agree. Like,
I
it's busy
do.
out there.
It's busy out there, and there are experiences that we have that validate the fact that, we shouldn't do something like that or
Mhm.
we should have known better, right? But no, we those are just learning moments, right?
Yeah.
But our body and our mind says, "Ooh, those were bad." And so
Protect
we don't
yourself.
trust.
Don't listen
Protect
to
yourself.
yourself.
Exactly. And that's what we have to stop doing. We have to stop
Mhm.
believing our inner critic and believing our inner coach, right? Because we all have that inner coach. Just shift that language from being critical to being supportive.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Well, if you're listening and you're like, "Whoa, I need to be listening more to my inner coach," as we all probably need a little help along the way. I don't know about y'all. Some days are a bit easier than others. Sometimes you listen more to the critics. It's like which wolf do you feed? It depends on which one's talking the loudest. And sometimes we got to work on finding ways to help that coach be a little bit louder than the critic so that we can be cheered along life. But I hope that you take some time to either check Johanna out. We'll make sure and link everything. And then maybe just take a few of these things that she shared into practice. Taking a moment to pause, If there's nothing else you do with your week, just pause. So, Johanna, I just want to acknowledge you for not only coming on today and giving us your time and your wisdom, but, at some point along the way, you had to do this kind of work, right? For yourself before you could give from that overflowing cup that we talked about. And, I always appreciate being able to have conversations with people who are really just trying to help people along this journey. Because I didn't get a manual when I landed. Did you?
Oh, no. I still haven't gotten a manual. I
Me
keep looking
neither.
for
Hope
it.
you find it. You let me know. You let me know. So if you're listening, y'all know I like to give y'all a nugget. And y'all know I'm taking a lot of nuggets because I always am learning right along with y'all. But just remember, I think I'm going to leave with what she gave her advice to her younger self is just learn to trust yourself. And you don't have to do it overnight if you haven't trusted yourself in a while. Just take one little thing, maybe this week, to trust yourself in. Maybe it's something that's telling you to go over to this place and do that thing you maybe haven't done before, or maybe you're like, oh, I might need to have this conversation, but I don't know if I want to have it, or maybe I need to start exploring different options for my life, and I just have maybe stopped myself because I don't think that's for me. Just learn to listen to yourself a little bit more and trust, like Johanna said, that you have whatever you need within you to help you move on to the next day, week, month, whatever next step is for you. Have a great day. Until next time.
That's all for today on Inspiring Possible. If you found a little inspiration today, please go on over to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen to leave us a comment and rate us. Also, make sure and link up with me at inspiringpossible.com to get the free Dream It, Write It, Do It workbook. And don't forget to follow us on social media and share this with anyone who needs to be inspired. Remember, if you can believe it, it's possible.